and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 127 with Jason Oldak, DP of Lessons in Chemistry. Enjoy. Have you, have you been watching anything cool?
Yes, I am. We're watching Fargo right now. Do you watch that show?
Oh, sure. Like as a family, like they haven't seen it before?
No, Fargo, the TV series.
Oh,
you watch it? I do love the movie also, but
yeah.
Do you watch it or no?
Yeah. We got, I think, well, I shouldn't say we've watched it because I think we're maybe 2 episodes in. So, and then we move on to something else. We got back on a Doctor Who kick because they started new Doctor Who, so we had to catch up with the ones we missed.
I don't know what Doctor Who is. What is that?
Oh, no kidding. It's a British man. All right, now this episode's about me. It's a British television show. It's a sci-fi-ish show. And I think it's probably the longest running television show in history because it started in like the 60s and then took a big break and then restarted in 2003 or something. But essentially the main character is this time traveling, space traveling alien who kind of looks like a human, and just goes around time and space solving problems and helping people. And but the conceit of the show is that being a Time Lord, the individual can regenerate when they die. So that's how they get new actors. And so, at the end of their series, they will die and then regenerate as the next actor. And it's always like a big deal. But the Doctor can be anyone. The Doctor regenerates into women, men, whatever color,
Where do you watch this? What streaming?
Oh, geez. It was on
platform?
So it's BBC. It was on Max for a while. I don't know if they moved it. I think the newest one is on Disney Plus. Yeah, but someone has it. There's no way they're like really trying to push it into America right now. And they're like, we're just going to take the rest of the old seasons off.
We last night we watched that movie Poor Things. Have you seen that movie yet?
I want to see that so bad. How was it?
It's great. I mean, you've seen his other movies, Yorgos's other movies. Yeah, it's just, it's so unique. Everything he's doing is so unique and different. And when I watched The Favorite, the fisheye lens thing, it kind of threw me out. I was, I wasn't sure if I liked it or not, but he does it again in this movie, and it really works. There's so many things that work in this movie. It's really good from a cinematic standpoint. I feel like Robbie Ryan did such a good job, and they just create such like you're in London, but you're in this fantastical place. Watch it. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, the one I'm excited. The ones we just watched were The Holdovers, which was fantastic. Oh goodness, so good. And from a cinematography perspective, there too, they really leaned into the I don't know how online you are, but a lot of kids are always like, how do I replicate the film look? And it's like, whoever was the DI on The Holdovers, we just need to talk to them because that's
who shot it. Who shot The Holdovers?
That's a great question. Let's find out. We have editing.
That was Alexander Payne directed that, right?
Yes. And I know people are kind of so-so on Alexander, not so-so, but you either love him or hate him, but did an amazing job with that one. Also, you also have to think like it's a Christmas film that's sad, kind of. Yeah. So I
like sad movies.
Yeah. Yeah. It's Eigel.
Times.
I forgot. It's Eigel. I fucking texted him right after I was like sitting. I'm like, who shot this? And then Eigel's name popped up, and I interviewed him for I think Foundation or something like that. But he also shot the first season of House of Cards.
Oh, okay.
Which obviously is very good. But I'm pretty sure they shot that digitally, so all the film kind of thing. But the lighting in that one, I also saw Saltburn, and the light is similar in both, very natural, but somehow in The Holdovers it feels more of the time. Like it feels very 1970s versus just natural light. Like the sun's been around forever. But
where does it take place? Because I feel like sometimes with cinematography, like the lighting and the period, like the light is different in different places, right? Like when I would see things in New York State, in the wintertime, like it's a different feeling than it is here in Los Angeles. So
it's Boston.
Yeah. So Northeast
and winter.
70s, winter. Yeah. So it's that low light. There's a different feel to it. I'm sure you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then, I feel like also, you add the elements in front of the camera, the costumes, the atmosphere, the set design. And then all of a sudden it really does feel like the 70s, Boston.
Yeah. Well, and that was actually something I did want to bring up about not to like jump straight ahead, because usually the first half is more other stuff. But like in your show, something I noticed was it's very modern looking, but the production design and the costuming make it the 50s, and it's a lot of. And I actually I think I prefer the Holdovers is unique because it looks like it was the shot, like they nailed it. Whereas I think everyone else trying to do, not everyone else, but a lot of times it'll feel kind of pastiche when you're trying to invoke a time with the aesthetics, the visual aesthetics, not the production design of costume, but like the camera. And I think in your show, it nailed the modern, like Fincher does this a lot. I feel like it's, instead of just trying to put you in the time period, it's like it's gonna look clean, but what's in front of it is the time. Why are we trying to?
I mean, less is more, right? It's like, we had, we're using vintage lenses. We're using the Canon K35s.
Really?
So yeah. So we're creating an element of period, but, our LUT kind of, sort of its origin is from that like old Agfa film feel, but there wasn't a lot that Zach and I really needed to do. Like you said, there's so much in front of the frame, the costume design, the production design, that I feel like we didn't want to force too much else. It's like that. I feel like those elements working in tandem with the way we're lighting it, making it, you used the word naturalism before. I mean, I feel like that term is used a lot these days.
Right.
And we tried really hard to really nail the term naturalism, to really, if you see that practical, to really make it feel like the room is being lit by that practical. And sometimes it would be just one extra cinema light that was just augmenting it. This was definitely the darkest show I've done in my career, in a good way, like low light, but low light, where it's feeling like that's where the naturalistic lighting is coming from. And so I don't know, nothing ever felt forced, I guess, with the period aspect of things. We referenced images at the beginning, but it was, filmmaking is a team effort, right? And I feel like your first step with being a cinematographer is like, what's in front of the camera? And like we said, the design element is already halfway there.
Well, and I did want to compliment you also on the lighting of it, because it is so, people always go, oh yeah, well my favorite painter's chiaroscuro and shit, and it's but you really did nail that kind of deep contrast, because that's something that I think a lot of people, everyone wants to talk, oh, this camera has great low light performance, and it's like I think we're missing the point about, like, if I want good low light performance, really what I mean is I just don't want the shadows to be noisy. I'm not, who the hell's shooting with no lights? And in this show, you really got like that amazing single source, soft kind of creamy look with deep shadows that I think is more what I would consider quote unquote low light, not like triple streamer Game of Thrones.
Of course. I think like, in other projects of mine and other people, you feel the need to have your key light kind of be that 3/4, right off from camera feel. And this was really about like, and this is obviously the trust in our producers and everyone else involved, is to it's like sometimes maybe the light is coming from a 3/4 edge, and then we just kind of wrap it with a little bit of grip attire, and the face goes dark. And that's, I mean, when you're in your house and you're moving through your house and there are lights scattered, that's how you're lit. So we tried to just do that as much justice as we could. Yeah.
I did read in a different interview you did that everything was LED. Did that go all the way into what's it called, the Separate 6 set, or did you keep that vintage?
Yeah, no, everything is LED. And I know there are some DPs that feel with period work that they want to do tungsten. I think the control these days with LED lighting is just so there that I'm so used to it. You have your dimmer board, you can control the temperature. I personally don't see as much of a difference as some other, obviously if you dim down a tungsten light, you're going to create a much warmer color.
Right. That beacon's yellow.
Yeah. And I would never say that I would not use tungsten lighting, but for a situation like this, for our show, using these small LED lights these days that give off so much light, and they're battery powered, it's like, how could you not try and use that? The Separate 6 set is an interesting one because Len Levine is our gaffer, and he is phenomenal. I've never worked with him before up until now, but he has quite the resume. And that was a big project of his. He basically retrofitted all of these old Mold Richardson lights, hollowed them out, or I guess MBS had hollowed them out for us. And then we put in all kinds of LED lights inside of them. So the set, although it could be photographed and looks like, all period lighting above, but there's no temperature raise, it's not 100 degrees on set. Specifically where Bree was standing behind the table, there are these 2 scoop lights, and he had put in, I think, light mat 4s inside both of them. So she's illuminated, but it was actually quite cold on set with all the air conditioning and everything. And there are some scattered babies up there, and there are some, I think the scoop lights above the audience members are actually real scoop lights, tungsten lights. But everything that's near anybody performing on the actual set was LED based. Even, I think he even put in hollowed out 10Ks. He put in, have you ever heard of these Helix lights? P10s?
Oh, they're great. They're so good.
Yeah. So I think he put either P10s or P3s in those, or maybe the P3s are in the little guys and the P10s. Yeah, they're amazing. And they're small. And I mean, it's, I don't know, as a cinematographer, I think that stuff's kind of cool, oh, this little LED light is powering this giant, it looks like it's powering this giant light.
Yeah.
Fun stuff. Yeah.
I remember in film school, I was, because at the time, this would have been 08, kind of 09. And so we didn't have any lights. We had those Lowell Tota, remember those little bars, and no grip. So everything was just this brutal hot, spot. And I remember seeing in an issue of American Cinematographer a zip light, a scoop light, and I remember thinking damn, if I ever get one of those, I will have and now here I am, Kino LEDs with that green source back there.
It's unbelievable where lighting. I mean, we talked about low lighting cameras, but where the technology in lighting has gone in the last 5-10 years. I mean, another gaffer collaborator of mine, he also is, he's been around for a long time. And so he's experienced, such a difference in technology. And I think as a gaffer, you really have to be up on it, just like an assistant camera person does, in terms of, what certain units are doing, what new things. I mean, there are each show I go on, I feel like there's different manufacturers for them. I didn't know, I've never heard of a Felix light until this show, but now it's a light I'll bring on another show, the cream sources, the vortexes, I think, are the common lights, the Arri family of lights, you hear about those, but then there's all these subsidiaries. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. The I think 2 years ago, maybe more, I finally got a color meter. because I could afford it. And I went around and metered everything in my house. I wrote an article about like which bulbs, like household bulbs you could use on set. Because, you know, I had ones from DWP, I had ones from IKEA, GE, all these things. And then I went to Film Tools and I metered all of their lights. And I found out that the sky panels are kind of middling. I mean, they're all good, but like you know, it was crazy to see that like,
you know, what do you mean by middling? What does that mean?
In comparison to other fixtures. So in terms of spectral output, not necessarily quality. So like the two things I was kind of looking for was when you put the number in the back of the thing, is that what you're getting? Right. So you put 5600, sometimes you get 65 on a bad side. So with the sky panels, you put 56 in, you're getting that, but the spectral output isn't great. It's like a lot more blue, and it doesn't have, because you meter the sun, or a tungsten, you know, the sun has all the colors, and then a tungsten is mostly orange. So like Kino Flow is almost perfect. You get a TLCI of 100 out of those things, which is insane. Roscoe, the little Roscoe dash is amazing.
Those two companies in particular, I wonder, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned them, but you know, when the LED craze has happened, I feel like they were so popular when I first started in film school. You know, you had your Kino tubes and everything. Yeah. And Kino as an LED company, I mean, they're creating good products, but I don't see them on set nearly as much.
So I actually got to talk, because of my job as a journalist. I got to talk to the guy, I think his name's Frieder, something like that. The guy who started Kino. And I asked him about that. And he was like, well, we wanted to come to I'm going to soft quote him, you know, I'm transliterating here, but he was basically like, you know, they wanted to come to the market correct. They wanted like the best light, but it just took them a long time. So the product didn't, and then Sky Panel came out in like, whatever, 2010. So they came 8 years late to the party. So now they're just trying to catch up with like the Mimic and stuff, which, you know, do you have any experience on the LED volumes?
No, but I did a project in October where it was an AR. It was like something that had to do with that game Minecraft.
Sure.
It was sort of dealing with a volume. It was, I guess you could call it more of a corporate gig, but it was essentially having these people on the volume feel like they're involved in the Minecraft game. So it was a 180-degree screen, and there were engineers that created AR and some other term. But so I really do, yes, exactly, XR. But I really do want to shoot on a volume, man. It seems so cool. That's one of those Star Wars shows.
Yeah,
cool.
I've talked to a few guys who've shot on them, and it does. I think everyone has the same reaction of that seems really cool, and then they get there and go, boy, this takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I know.
You know, you really got.
You know what I want to try on a volume is like essentially what you would do with rear screen projection with driving. Because my biggest problem with, unless you have like top of the line rear screen projectors, the blacks always look milkier than, you know, how your camera is recording, and it just doesn't feel real. And I feel like it would be an expensive way of doing it. And I know people are doing it that way, but to be on a volume stage and shoot your car driving that way seems to be like the best way to recreate if you can do process trailer.
100%. There's actually two. So I talked to Messerschmitt about, I don't know if they did it on Mank, but they did it on Mindhunter. I think Eigel had like a version of it on House of Cards, but Fincher's been pushing that. I was about to use a bad phrase, but I really enjoy Fincher's work, let's say. So I study it a lot. But they've been basically doing that, whereas first they just had blue screens, and then they would use like TVs basically to get the reflections correct, and then they moved them down. So I think they did that. They've done that on Gone Girl and the new one, The Killer.
But could you imagine, like with the volume, you know, now your screen, the window up top, it actually will feel like things are moving because your car is almost like covered completely. I mean, I never felt like the screen that I put above the window, the front front window, ever looked real. The lights kind of like move slow, and
there's actually a like a semi truck. I don't know what you want to call it, a trailer that has I don't know if it's just a demo unit or if this is what they intend, but they had it at Kino at this party, and it's literally the entire inside of the semi is a volume, and they use it for process.
Interesting. I did a show a few years ago called Minx, and we had to do some car stuff, but so the show takes place in the 70s, right? And so the challenge that we had with that show was, well, if we do use rear screen projection, or rather if we use rear screen projection, we have to get footage from the 70s, but they didn't shoot 5 different angles from the 70s. And if we do it in real time, do we have a VFX budget? We ended up finding a company that goes out, they essentially do the same thing. They set up like 6 cameras on top of their on top of their car. And then they have whatever period you're shooting, they have like a cluster of those period cars surround their car. So it feels like you're in a period setting. I mean, it was wild. It worked for that show, but yeah.
That's actually a cool job, like to come up with.
Yeah, right. But you can't close down streets. So if you look really hard, you could see like 3 cars back, there's, a Tesla or something. Yeah. Prius. Like, wait a minute.
I did want to ask, going back, because it's kind of the same thing, is like you had said that you didn't work with, what was the name, Len, on this
Len,
on the show. Yeah. What kind of things do you learn from your gaffers? Because I feel like, the role of the DP, especially if people come up through lighting, it could be easy to think like, oh, I know everything here because now I'm in charge. But that's obviously not true. So like, what do your gaffers teach you besides the tech side?
Yeah, I mean, they teach me an unbelievable amount, just like every other person on my set. Before I got into filmmaking, I was a fine artist. So I feel like, did I come up in lighting? Not necessarily. I came up in all things just from my educational process at film school. But, I guess I would say I was more of a, I was a camera operator before I became a DP and, doing things in that world. But I feel like every gaffer that I've worked with educates me in different ways in terms of like how much I can push myself, how, we could use this tool to, for instance, like on this job, and I don't know why I haven't done this yet, but like, Len, on top of like creating your units to come in through the window and act as your daylight, he rigged par cans directly above the windows on almost all our windows in our lab and our house. And they would almost directly shoot down, maybe slightly 3/4, and they would just hit the bottom of the windowsill. And from that, it kicked up into the room and just gave enough ambience. And it felt like that extra level of heat that sold daylight that much more. And it's a trick that has been around for a long time. I've never seen it before. And I was like, bam, I'm going to use that again on another show, whether it's with him or someone else, It's those little things. It's like, when I was a camera operator, I would watch what the DPs were doing, whether they were doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and learn from that. I think as a filmmaker, you constantly have to be learning from the people you're working with. And I just, I try and hire people that I trust and look up to, and, I'll suggest something, but always expect them to give me something back tenfold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great, just though I'm thinking about the window thing, that almost derailed my thought process. Cause I'm so used to seeing like, you'll put like the hard light through the window and then they'll put maybe like a Titan tube or something to like, but that's almost the opposite of that. That's so smart.
We like any show, it seemed like we had a lot of money and then we didn't have enough money, and they built a lot of sets. We weren't able to light all the sets with the budget that we had, so we had to be creative. And, so we had sort of these LED space lights outside, affordable space lights. So those are giving you the ambience. And then we used Q10s to shoot through the windows. But, that the par cans added that extra level of heat on the window sill. And a lot of our lighting did happen to come from our windows. We brought some things inside, but a lot of it was coming in from outside. So those par cans, that's another thing. They just, once they push off the blinds or the windowsill, it's controllable and not controllable, but it gives that sense of realness.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I remember learning early on in my career was the idea of the quote unquote fuck it light, which is you set up your light, you make everything look good, and then you'll get like a par or whatever, or a Lico, cut it, and then just aim it at something wrong. Like close your eyes and aim it, and then it like that makes it look normal.
Yes. Yeah. The fuck it light.
Yeah. The show looks really good. What was I going to say? Then I had another note. Oh yeah. What were you doing in fine art? Was it fine art photography?
So I was doing, early on in high school, I was doing painting and drawing, like nothing related to film at all. And then I went to a school called Cooper Union in New York City. It's a fine art school. But the cool thing about that school is they don't require a major when you first start as an artist, because they think at 18 years old, how do you know what you want to do as an artist? There's like so many things to experiment with that you probably didn't have the opportunity to do in high school. So I started to get into photography, and I think second or third year while I was there, I got into filmmaking. But it's an art school, right? So it was really experimental. I mean, there were students that were drawing on the negatives, like they weren't actually making stories. And I felt compelled to try and make stories as best I could. So we were shooting on Super 8, 16. And, I don't really want to show those films to anybody, but I feel like it was the beginning of it all. And, at the time I was doing everything. So I didn't truly understand, what I know now in terms of like how everything is made. But as I went through that process, I knew that I was really into this medium. I left art school and I worked as a graphic designer for a few years because I just needed to make some money, and still didn't, painting has always been a love of mine, but I don't know. It was just, I kind of needed something that had some financial stability.
And cinematography.
Well, it's better than most other mediums.
Certainly better than painting.
Better than painting. But graphic design for a few years felt like legit, but then I didn't want to sit in front of a computer my whole life. I just didn't want to do that. I love graphic design. I think it's fantastic. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so I went to this, around the same time, I had gone to this Q&A at a museum in New York called the Museum of Moving Image. And this is back 2002. So Gordon Willis was still alive. Conrad Hall was still alive. A couple other big DPs. And they were at this Q&A. It was like a master's seminar. And I went there not knowing anything, but, I liked the movies that they were talking about and listened to them talk, and they talked about their backgrounds. And they talked about their backgrounds. Some of them were painters and photographers and still were. And I said, oh, shit, well, let me look into cinematography. Cinematography seems like the right thing for me to try and do. So I started to look into film schools that offered that. And, I applied, did all this stuff, and eventually I got into AFI.
So
brought me out to Los Angeles.
Well, so that brings up two questions. I do want to know what your opinion is of the filmmaking landscape of New York versus Los Angeles, which I always try to ask, but because they are different, Atlanta's is different. But every single person who comes on this podcast and has gone to AFI is killing it. And so I always ask, what is it about AFI to you that makes it so much of a success factory for its students?
Well,
and they're not paying me for that question, so
yeah. I'll start with your AFI question first. So I actually just went to AFI and spoke to the students there, which was awesome because I had not been there in that way. I had not been back to the school really in almost 20 years when I graduated from there. So it was really fulfilling to just talk about this show, but also to talk about filmmaking in general and, think about where I was at when I was sitting in their seats and so curious about what I was about to do next. For me, I can only speak to my time there because I know Stephen Lighthill's still running the program, but I don't know. I hope it's better than when I was there. But for me at the time, it seemed like the best option in terms of it was the most focused on a specific craft, right? NYU, USC, they all kind of were generalized crafts, graduate programs. And, most people wanted to do directing and writing. And this one, AFI specifically has each discipline and each discipline works together. You make the movies you need to make while you're there, and then you get out. Like the best thing they could do is like push students to their limit for 2 years and then get out into the real world because you can only learn so much in this bubble of a film school. You have to figure out how to do it in the real world and you'll fail by doing it and then you'll succeed, but I just think it was such an intensive education. And I, as I've just described, like I went in there basically not knowing anything. Like I knew some stuff, basic stuff, but from the technical side, I knew nothing. And so what they did beyond technical, I think and this is what I heard from some of the students when I was there that had gone to an undergrad film program, they felt like there was one teacher there, his name is Bill Dill. I think he still teaches the one class I'm going to talk about. It's called the visual storytelling class. And he would look at each of your, I think they still call them cycle projects, like your first year films that you make with your other collaborators. And he would watch it in one sitting and break down and talk to you, ask you, critique you. Why did you put the camera there? Why did you think about doing that? And really educate us in how to break down a script and figure out what are your reasons for placing the camera and shooting the scene like you're doing? What is the motivation of the scene? What's the emotion, etc.? And it really has helped me. I mean, as you work, you get better and better, but it's helped me to really dissect the script and figure out visually if I'm doing the script justice. And then because I think anybody can learn the technical stuff, like, you get better, you figure out how to but that really helped me as a cinematographer to think about the script from an artistic standpoint, and a storytelling standpoint. So I fully support the school and, I hope they're even better now. I mean, I'm sure they have the tools now, way better tools than we had, in terms of cameras and lighting and everything else. But you still need to start with the basics, like I said, with the visual stuff. New York versus LA. So when I was in New York, I didn't really do a lot of filmmaking. Before I came out here for film school, I was working, I don't know how I got on this project, but there used to be a channel on TV called the Sci-Fi Channel.
Oh, it was my favorite, dude. That was, I loved that shit.
So somehow there was a short film that was being made near my school or somewhere in the lower Manhattan area. And the DP was Maurice Alberti, who I got on the project in the art department. Like I didn't even, wasn't even part of the camera side things. And I was helping out the art department. And every time I would be on set when they were shooting, I would watch what the camera guys and ladies were doing. And I was watching Maurice and, oh man, that is cool. Way cooler than what I'm doing right here. So that was my first experience with filmmaking in New York. But since I left film school, I worked on some projects in New York. And, the cool thing about New York is like, it's its own, like the location of New York is a cast member in your project, right? It's like the backdrop of it is uncomparable to anywhere else. It's like Paris. It's like, I think it's harder to work in New York. You're working on 5-story walk-ups and, You have to figure out how to tie in electric wise, and you're taking the train to work, instead of hopping in your car and putting your carts and your back of your truck and things like that. LA is definitely built for an easier way of working in production. But I don't know. I keep telling my agent, like, you have anything in New York? I want to shoot something in New York. It's a fun city to be in. It's very lively and yeah.
Yeah. What was the you brought up a good thing there. What was I feel like at a certain point, a lot of filmmakers will hit a point where their career where they feel ready and they start asking the question of agent, manager, whatever. When was that point for you, and maybe when would you suggest that for someone else?
Sure. So I had not had the luxury of like a film winning Sundance or something like that, where my career changes overnight and then all of a sudden these agents start calling, But what I did have is I had an opportunity at some point where a friend of mine who actually had success in that world, in the Sundance world, he got the opportunity to shoot a show called Casual, which was on Hulu. It came out, I don't know, 8 years ago or something, maybe more. And he was the DP on season 1 and 2, and we were very good friends. And he brought me on immediately as the A operator on both seasons. And once season 2 came around, he really felt like he needed to do some other things and spoke to the producers and said, I really think you should give Jason the opportunity. I was doing some second unit for them at the time. They knew my background. But more importantly, they took a gamble on me, because I know where the story goes a very different way, where the producers are like, no, thanks. We'll go hire somebody who has an agent and has a resume and all this stuff. And they didn't do that. And so I ended up shooting season 3 and 4. And while I was shooting season 3, I felt like, okay, this is an opportunity to reach out to agents, because what everyone needs to realize about an agent is that they're selling you. You're a product. And if they can't sell you, then they can't do anything with you. So I had friends early on in film school where they somehow got an agent way before I did, but they weren't getting anything from that agent, and they were frustrated, and then they wanted to go to another agency, and they continued to have that struggle. And I just feel like you have to get the work, and once the work starts coming, they'll get more work for you, but you kind of have to do that on your own. I would say even to this day, at least 60% to 70% of my work is from somebody I know, but the agent facilitates the deal or also gets me in the room with other interviews. They're absolutely needed, but you need to do the work at the beginning. So when I had this opportunity, I reached out to friends, because you can't cold call an agency either. That won't work. So I reached out to DPs that were friends of mine that were represented at various agencies, and they said, hey, can you put in a good word? This is what I'm doing now. And they did. And I met with a few of them, and then the agent who I have today is the same guy who I met at that time, and he took me on. And I don't know. It's an interesting relationship. But the biggest thing that everybody needs to realize is, like, they're selling you, and if you don't have the credits for them to sell you on, then just keep shooting.
Yeah.
And eventually, like, something will happen, whether your movie will get into, South by Southwest or Tribeca, or you'll get on a TV show like I did. I mean, something will happen where you can then get an agent.
I think that's the funny thing is there's so many corporate elements to filmmaking and so many artistic elements, and maybe that's something they don't teach. Well, maybe AFI does, but certainly not my.
They don't. School. No, they don't.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I wish leaving film school that at least the cinematography program focused more on, is about some of the real world stuff. We had I think we had a guest speaker who happened to be in that world, that agent world, come in, but I feel like the professors could have done a better job at that time. This is 2003 to 5. But, there's some things you kind of have to figure out on your own, like in terms of how you get from place to place. Everyone has their own path, right? It's like, I worked with this person who recommended me for this job, then this job. Your path would be different than mine. But, talking about like how you get an agent, things like that film students want to know about, preparing yourself for not shooting a big thing right out of film school. Like every film student, including myself, thinks like, yeah, I'm going to get this big movie in the next 3 years. Maybe.
Well, and to that point, I think a lot of students, of any school, of any discipline, you spend the first 21 years of your life being told this is the next step, this is the next step, this is the next step, and then you kind of get in that rhythm. It's kind of like the military where you just do what you're told and then you keep going. And then you graduate and now they're like, all right, your turn to figure it out. And you're like, well, what's the guidance here? And they're like, none. There isn't any. Go network.
That's exactly what happened with the head of AFI when I was about to graduate. I walked into his office and I asked him that. I said, all right, Steven, so what's next? And he kind of shrugged his shoulders in like the nicest way possible. He's like, you're going to figure out your own tree graph, your own path. I can give you pointers, but there's no one way to do it. Like a doctor has very straight path, it's like go to medical school, do this, you become successful that way.
Yeah, it is. I think too, it does feel like maybe prior to, I'm making this number up, maybe prior to like the 80s, it felt like filmmaking was very small club, which is good and bad, right? Obviously bad for certain people getting in. But good for not a lot of attention on what you're doing. So it's a little easier to move around. And then at a certain point, it became so commercialized that now it feels like a real job, quote unquote real job, but still kind of isn't.
Yeah.
There's
a lot, from what that time period you're talking about. And now there's a lot because of technology. I think there's a lot more opportunity for filmmakers to make product.
Yeah, see,
I know. To make films and create stories and get your projects out there, But I think this strike that just happened and where the industry is going is interesting because I think there was so much that now I think it's going to shrink a little bit in terms of how many projects are actually going to be made. There's still going to be more than there was in the 80s, and there's still going to be opportunity for somebody that's younger in their career to get going and make things sooner. You don't just have to have your dad be in the industry to get into the industry. But I think things are going to be changing, at least in television, but movies too. I mean, how many movies go, I just watched Maestro and it's, what an amazing movie. But, that movie is going to be in the theater for a little bit. It's going to be right onto Netflix. And it's like, that's a big movie, and then there are movies that go straight to Netflix that some people don't ever see,
Yeah.
So the movie industry is strange these days also. I don't know.
Well, it's something that this is not a hot take or anything, but I feel like I'm frustrated by what certain companies will advertise. Like they will prejudge a film and go, well, that's not worth. Like, I don't think we needed every road in Los Angeles to have an Oppenheimer billboard. We knew about it. We knew it was coming out. But there's certain small, I don't know if the Holdovers had any billboards, but I don't think I saw any. Like, I think they need to spend less money advertising the next Marvel project because the people who are going to see it, and more money putting a bigger ad buy on these smaller films or ones that maybe wouldn't get as much attention, because I think that would also change the side tangent. I saw an interview with Jeff Bezos, and of all people, and a broken clock is right twice a day. And he said that, if the data and the anecdotes don't line up, then you need to trust the anecdotes usually, because the data is probably incorrectly. So when people keep saying like, oh, all movies suck today, or like everything is a CG fest, it's like, no, there's amazing films out there. It just wasn't advertised to you. in LA, it's easier to, know about these things.
Yeah.
But, in the middle of the country, or even people I have friends of mine who live here like, I don't watch movies. And I think a lot of it has to do with like, you're not presented. There's so much noise. You're not presented with these interesting films like Godzilla Plus One. Everyone seems to be loving that thing. And I have not seen a single ad for it.
Yeah.
That's like a Godzilla movie.
Yeah. I think we're also living in a different time of advertising with the amount of shows. Like word of mouth, I find, is sometimes stronger than a billboard for me. Like if you go to various parties and gatherings and whatever else you're doing, work every day, and people in your circle start talking about Godzilla or whatever show, all of a sudden you start hearing about this. Now, where did that come from? I don't know. Where did that start? But and the internet, I think, is another way to advertise with. The marketing campaigns of certain movies have to be smart sometimes in terms of like, how do you get out to certain audiences without it just being your traditional billboard? Maybe billboards cost so much money now that only Oppenheimer movies are going to do that, put Barbies and Oppenheimers and things. But yeah, there are a lot of movies that fall through the crack, and specifically the movies that, may or may not be good, but are made and then they end up on a streaming site. And if the streaming site doesn't advertise them because maybe they're not so good, but they're made, then it just ends up in purgatory.
Right.
It ends up like hidden in your menu system, in your Hulu. And then as the filmmakers made the movie, you're like, what's the point? Not what's the point, but like, it's, people
make
to see
things
your
to share 'em.
project.
Yeah. You make them for you, but the whole point of making a movie is to, otherwise you would just write a script and go, there they go, that's done.
Yeah, okay. So
or you're making the room.
To what you just said, there's something that's circulating on the internet right now. Rick Rubin, he wrote a book about like...
I want to read that book so bad.
I do too. But there's a video of him probably talking about the book, and he specifically talks about how he makes things for himself. And, as cinematographers, it's, you're not creating the project, you're not writing the project, but you are making it with those collaborators. But it is an interesting take, because if you're just making that movie to satisfy yourself, then it doesn't matter where it goes, right? You are satisfied in the project you've made. It's up to the audience to either watch it and like it or not, but you should feel complete about the project you made,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I 100% agree, obviously, but you got to make money somehow. But that actually,
Of course.
yeah, that actually changed the way that I rate movies. I go on a 1 to 5 scale, and unless it's objectively bad, and I mean like objectively, like things are out of focus, that sounds bad, bad. That's a 0. For me, a 1 is wasn't made for me. Like someone might like this, but it's just not for me. Because there's tons of movies out there that weren't made. I can't remember. I was bitching about this was in college. Some movie came out, and maybe it was Twilight, who knows? And I was just like, oh, it's so stupid, whatever. And my friend of mine was like, well, it's not made for you. I was like, what? And they're like,
You're not the audience.
yeah, why are you complaining? There's other movies.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, there's like a 19-year-old, I was like, not every movie's made for me.
And then you now as a filmmaker, how many people work to make that project happen, and that's what I hate sometimes about critiques of movies and TV shows, where they just slam something and you're like, okay, you didn't like it, but maybe it's not for you, and then all these people that made that project. But I get it. It's part of the business of it all,
It's also helped me personally, like, enjoy movies that aren't made for me. Like, to see what they were doing, especially going with someone who it was made for helps. But like, once I'm sure you feel this way too. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, you make enough film, or you watch enough film, and then you kind of start to see the code in the matrix, as it were, and you can get what emotions they were going for, and what story they were trying to tell. Whether or not it entertained you or elated you is a different issue. Whether or not it worked is
definitely. And I also, going back to just our advertising conversation, like, I feel like when I am not hearing about a project, a movie or something, or I tend to know, I feel like I'll know if that project is good or bad.
Yeah.
You kind of just get it. You're like, oh, everyone's talking about this. This is good. Or this is nobody knows about this movie. This is, but yeah, you kind of just, the more you just get how the business is made and how it all functions and everything.
Yeah. That kind of brings me to something I did want to ask about. I feel like Apple TV, I am not an Apple fan. I do have an iPad, but I don't have any other products of theirs. However, I feel like Apple TV has only made good shows. I don't think there's a single bet. Did you have any interaction with them or maybe any insight as to how they're choosing their products, making their projects, and how the look of them all seem to be consistent, even though they're made by wildly different people? It's not the ABC problem. I used to work for ABC. The ABC problem, if there's like a mandate,
Do you feel like their shows look the same? Somebody else said that to me before they watched Lessons in Chemistry, and I said, well, I feel like our show is different, but I'm biased. But because they were implying, they were like, does Apple do something to their shows to make it all look the same? And I said, no, I definitely know they didn't do that to us.
Right.
But okay, so in general, I feel like Apple was not involved with being on set day to day. I think they trusted us as filmmakers, especially after they saw, the dailies and knew what was happening. I'm sure they were involved in the pre-production of script development and whatnot, but I don't think they were as controlling as you hear other studios to be. I do think they're choosy in terms of their projects because they can be, because they have a lot of money already as a business. So they don't have to churn out a Netflix factory like Netflix is doing. Love Netflix. So I just think that Apple maybe just is more decisive on the shows that are going on. But like the morning show and C and Lessons in Chemistry, I mean, at least from a lighting standpoint, look totally different to me. And I know they're using different lenses and everything. So I don't know. I don't see that, but
I should backtrack. I don't mean to suggest they all look the same, but there is a certain polish to everything. Maybe it is just like like you're saying, they're able to be choosy. They're able to make sure that the quality is there. It could just be that, but there is, and I haven't seen every Apple show, so I can't say definitively if I feel this way, but there does seem to be a pause. I mean, when we were talking to Greg Middleton, he was saying that Disney has a library of their LUTs, because I was asking him, like, how do all the Marvel stuff look the same, and they clearly can't have a handle on everyone, and he was like, when we made Moon Knight, we just asked for whatever LUT it was, and they gave it to us, and we modified that, and I was like, of course they do. Of course they just have like a library of all the looks.
I heard you talking to Isaac about Loki 2, and it's a fantastic looking show. And he was also saying the same thing about, but that becomes like a Marvel thing, right? Like Apple, so their Marvel universe is all like these certain characters, whereas, at Apple Studio, they never talked to us about a LUT or color timing or anything like that. In fact, there was never any direction from them in terms of, for us as cinematographers. But I
must just be a quality thing. They only get high quality work.
I think so. I mean, I appreciate that they don't have a million shows on their network like HBO used to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on Max now, but
a lot.
I think less is more, especially with so much content out there. It allows the audience to like focus on, the show that's being presented at the moment. And I also really love networks that show one episode a week instead of watching 10 episodes in 2 days. For me, it's like we work on these series for 6 months and then you watch the show in 2 days, and it's like, it kills it for me.
No, I feel the
Apple
same
didn't
way.
do that. Yeah.
Well, and like look at like Stranger Things, right? It's that show, insanely popular, great show.
Yeah.
And then you stop talking about it after a week because everyone watched it day one.
Exactly.
And it feels like I'm going to put on my corporate hat for a second. If you want the show to be in the public eye for a longer time, drag it out.
You know what I have another problem with? And, there's like negotiations right now with like our unions talking about like I hate when a show ends and then the credits come on and in 5 seconds, it either sends you to the next episode or it basically
It'll start a new movie.
It'll start a new movie. It'll start a new episode. It won't show you the credits of the people that made the show. And specifically, it doesn't show below the line people. It shows 5 actor names and then it immediately goes away. And this is every streamer does this. And I really don't like that.
I agree.
Because there's so many people that work so hard to make these shows. You should have the option to click off of the credits, but to just minimize it to a small window. And then you're like fumbling to try and watch the credits. And then it goes to the next episode and then you have to go back. It's pretty annoying.
Yeah. But, I think Amazon might have the next thing in the bottom versus switching it.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
But yeah, but even so, it's down there and then it says like the next thing's coming in 5 seconds.
Yeah. And it's got this little countdown. It's like, at least give 40 seconds or you're like,
That's actually why I've given a lot of credit to Criterion before, the streamer, because what you were talking about like a smaller selection. I think the curation every month, they like kick off a bunch of movies and put on a bunch of movies. And that thing does 2 things that I think is great. One, it creates a sense of urgency. I should watch
Gotta watch this.
Versus I'll get to it later. It kind of, I think all of us sort of need to be forced to ingest art these days, not in a bad way, but like encouraged, let's say.
I need to get that streamer.
It's so good.
I know. I have been meaning to get that.
Over here, these 3 rows, these top 2 rows are all Criterion discs. I feel like they should be a discount on the streamer. But
the Criterion.
Yeah. But also just like the curation itself, like the fact that there's less movies is interesting, but also just the idea of that. Oh wait, no, I did that backwards. The in and out thing is awesome because they'll go, oh, it's Halloween, so here's like all of the black and white horror films from the 50s, and I love that. There's like the other day they had like a kind of a cyberpunk kick. The other day, it was 3 months ago. And they had like something crazy I'd never seen. They had Johnny Mnemonic in black and white.
Oh, what?
It had never been on a streamer. And they had like an official version.
Wait, so Johnny Mnemonic, was that originally something else?
Color.
Like Keanu Reeves did.
Yeah, it's color.
But so they changed it to black and white?
They did a grade on it. Like, I don't know if Criterion did, but the filmmakers did a black and white pass. And it makes it super noir and it works way better, in my opinion, than the color version.
Oh, cool.
Because the color version is kind of
check that out.
Campy a little bit, but
right.
But the black and white version suddenly like makes it all sit really nicely. And there's stuff like that, and obviously all the like behind the scenes, like, or not behind the scenes, I don't really do that, but like interviews and stuff that they do on the streamers.
So they don't have features, behind the scenes things that you used to get when you'd buy a disc.
Yeah,
they don't have anything like that on there.
They do sort of. Most of the time, it'll be big long interviews with the filmmakers.
Got it.
Up to like an hour and a half long, like sort of making of documentaries, but they don't have quite the like behind the scenes, Lord of the Rings extended edition type.
Right.
I've actually pitched this idea to a lot of DPs on the show. It's like we all need to band together and see how much the rights to special features are on DVDs and just create a streamer exclusively of that. Yeah, we could sell it as an education platform, so like students could write it off and shit. But like,
I've heard you talk about that, and I think that is a great idea. It's the one thing that I loved when I would buy Blu-rays and DVDs, because as a filmmaker, it's like that. I was always interested in how it was made. I would watch that sometimes over the movie, but yeah, I don't. But it falls into like a question of who owns that, right? Like, is it the studio? Will they part with that separation of movie and feature? At this point, why not? Because you can't, it's not even found on their streaming sites,
Well, it's free money for them, right? And
yes,
I feel like you can negotiate a deal where like they're not listening to this, so I can But like, I feel I'll give the game away a little bit, but like, I feel like they don't value
Don't
it.
give too much.
Yeah. But I feel like they don't quite value it monetarily. So like, we could probably get like a decent deal off of it, and then and not have to charge too much. Because the other thing I want to do is just like with your different languages, put commentary. Yeah, it's an MP3. It's 20 megabytes. Put the commentary in the language thing. Any
So like while you're watching a movie, you can switch from subtitle or commentary.
Yep.
And then you can hear the filmmaker talk. Yeah.
English, Spanish, German, Japanese commentary. I think that's a good idea. I did, but go ahead.
No, they used to do that all the time. You know, you'd watch like the movie, and then there'd be a feature where the director and DP would talk about the movie while it's playing. That's bringing it back for me.
The famous one. This isn't going to be a shock to anyone, but like, there's a famous one of Ben Affleck doing Armageddon. Have you seen that?
No.
Oh, dude, I think it's on the Criterion actually, because Armageddon's in Criterion. Funnily enough,
wait, he didn't direct that. He was just an actor
in the commentary. Yeah,
got it.
And he's questionably lucid, and is just really like, at one point he's like, I was talking to the director about why is it easier to change, to train drillers to go to space. Why, like, they're NASA. Of course they can learn how to drill. And I guess the director just looks at him and goes, "Shut the fuck up, Ben."
That's on the commentary?
Oh yeah, no, there's a highlight reel on YouTube you can look up of Ben Affleck's Armageddon commentary, and he's just making fun of Bruce Willis. It's so good. That would make it
funny.
That would make it better. I just looked at my notes again. I did want to ask you, on hard pivot to your show again. You didn't shoot the whole show. It's not very common to shoot the whole thing yourself. What was the relationship like between you and the other DP, and like, how did you communicate about the look, and was there a lookbook, and how did you keep everything consistent?
Yeah. So this actually, out of all the shows I've shot on television, this was the first one I was doing with another cinematographer. Just because I've done a lot of 30-minute shows, and even the hour-long shows I did, I don't know why, but they had me doing all of them. There is such a plus after this experience to working with someone else, strictly from a prep standpoint. You can properly prep with your directors for your episodes and feel like you did all the homework you needed going into it. It was, I can't tell you how amazing that felt. And I think the work shows in the show, because I wasn't scrambling and hoping that the directors did their own prep like I've done in the past with some of my other shows. Because once you start shooting, if you have director 7, you're like, okay, good luck. I hope you know what you're doing, because you have like an hour to sit with them. Anyway, so Zach Galler is the other DP. He, I did lessons in chemistry together, and Zach and I didn't know each other before the show, but if I could do a show with someone again, it would be him. He was just an unbelievable collaborator in many ways. He happened to go first, but he never treated the show like, this is my show, this is how it was shot, you will follow these rules. And I've heard that happen in other situations with other people. And the interesting thing about this show is that it is, number one, it's based on a book, but it chronicles a woman's life. And the way it's set up, each chapter almost feels like a different moment in her life.
Right.
So
almost an anthology, kind of.
It's an anthology. And I really do believe that in general, there should be consistency throughout a show, because you have different directors and different DPs, and there needs to have this consistent line of what this project is. But beyond that, each episode really gave us a lot of freedom to do the things we needed to do cinematically to tell the story properly. And so Zach and I, at the beginning, before he even started shooting, we would talk about the show, and we even looked at our own lookbooks from when we both interviewed separately and we shared some images together. So we were already on the same page in terms of like what direction we needed to go with. And then as he started shooting, I would come downstairs and kind of check on what they were doing. You know, I looked at a little bit of the dailies just so I knew the direction that he was shooting. But from the beginning, he was like, please, whatever you do with 3 and 4, it's your show as much as it is mine. And so that was a really nice thing to hear. And it just so happened that in episode 3, you know, there's a death that happens at the, so hard pivot. So there was a lot of freedom for us to do the things we needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a gorgeous looking show. How do you, that just made me, I don't think I've ever asked this of anyone, but obviously we have a shot deck now, but when you're putting together a lookbook, kind of how are you doing that? But also like, how much of it is kind of trying to appease the director, like trying to get the job kind of, and how much of it is you trying to put yourself in, like, how do you trust either side of that equation?
It's obviously it's a fine line, right? Because you want to put images, you read the script, right? I actually didn't read the book before I got the job or even before I started shooting the show, because sometimes, you know, writers change the direction and I didn't want to get confused. So I read the script. There were 2 scripts that were produced before both Zach and I interviewed, and I read them. And like any other interview, I went into Shot Deck and some other areas that I searched on the internet and found images that I felt connected to what I read. You know, I think that if you're trying to, you know, you have to put on page what you think the show should be. And if it's wrong, then that wasn't the right job for you. But if you're trying, and this is my opinion, and it happened to me once on another television show, I put together a lookbook and 2 minutes into the interview, I knew the showrunner didn't agree with what I put on, and I knew I didn't have that job. And that was okay, because that is just how it works sometimes. But you kind of have to put your stamp and your feel. And the best thing you could get is they're on the interview with you and they go, your lookbook was amazing. It's exactly what we were thinking. You know, that's the images that we found. You know, it's like, you're like, yes, I got the job or something. But I don't know. You kind of have to take a risk to an extent. You know, in film school, one of our professors said when you're interviewing, and this was pre-Zoom interviews, when you're in the room, you know, you ask the director questions as much as they're asking you questions. And it is important because you want to learn what is the process what's the story that they want to tell? How do they, and is it the same story you want to tell? Like, you know, the director starts talking about handheld for the whole show and you're like, oh, this feels like a studio show, you know, like you need to know that. But in terms of imagery, I think you kind of just have to, go with your gut.
Yeah.
Shot Deck, man, what an amazing library.
Shout out to Larry. I've been trying to get I see him at so many events and I'm like, hey, you want to do the pod? And he's like, yeah. And then you don't hear from him because he's busy.
He's going to interview you the way, I mean, Larry is one of the best interviewers on the ASC Clubhouse stuff. I love what he does, but really it's, I think every filmmaker is so appreciative of him and the team that puts Shot Deck together. It's unbelievable how helpful it is to do the interviews. In fact, sometimes I feel like I want to look for images elsewhere now because everybody's on there. But it has so many images that how could you not, you know?
Yes.
I think sometimes what I run the risk in, sometimes I try and pull photographs, you know, still photographs. And I used to early on in my career pull like paintings and things, but some directors don't fully understand how that could relate. You know, like if you're showing a painting, hopefully you're talking about color or the way the contrast is feeling in the painting or something. But it really depends on the director you're talking with because some of them may not see that so clearly as like an image from a movie or reference of that sort.
Yeah. One of the earlier episodes that I did with Tim Ives, I asked him, I was like, oh, I can't even remember how this came up, but he's like, oh, I love photo books. And I was like, oh, which ones? And he goes, 1 second. And he comes back with a stack. I mean, just like it went out of the frame and did like a show and tell with me and I ended up buying like as many as I could find that weren't $1 million. But like, I really became, after that interview, I really became a photo book guy.
Photo books are great, and art books in general. I mean, I think that process happens. You get the job, and then you start looking at images together. And that's another thing about your interview lookbook versus where the show goes after the fact. Like you find images that relate, and sometimes it you stick with those images. But a lot of the times, I feel like you find 1 or 2 images from that lookbook. You talk with the director or showrunner or whoever about working off of that, that idea, because things change, as the other department heads start talking, the production designer starts showing images that they put together, and you're like, oh, that's great. It's a team effort.
Yeah. What was the lookbook for Tim and Eric?
I don't think there was a lookbook for that. I don't remember. Honestly, so that's so funny. I did 3/4 of the first season of their show. I didn't know who they were. And I don't know if a lot of people did, but their true fans did. And I remember shooting that season and I was like, what is this? This is crazy. It was crazy. But then like so many of my friends went through that like factory of Tim and Eric, in fact, the guy that I worked with on Casual, he shot the second season. My friend Rachel did their movie. Like, it's just, it's amazing how many people I know have worked with them since. But yeah, that is early on in my career for sure.
That show, I mean, there's a few not like it, but there's a few shows where it's like, all right, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to break every rule of filmmaking, because it had such a early internet feel to it that it was shocking that they allowed it on television.
Oh my God. I mean, it was Adult Swim, so it's like late night, but we were shooting with like a DVX something and
DVX 100, maybe.
Yeah. And like really basic lighting, from Wood and Nickel, and it was that kind of show.
Yeah.
But that is a good question. I wonder how I got that job. I must have brought in something to show them. I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, did they call you, or like did you apply for that?
No, somebody referred me. In fact, I think it was my friend Rachel who referred me because she had gone to NYU with like the editor or something like that. And so they interviewed me, but I don't know. This was like one of my very first jobs in film school. Yeah.
That's, oh man, if that's not what they prepare you for. Well, maybe when I was in college, shit like that, but dumb, heavy air quotes. But yeah, you're like, I'm gonna be the next Scorsese. It's like, no, you're gonna shoot too many cooks.
Oh my God. But their show, I mean, I don't think they're doing their show anymore, but it really didn't change. The look didn't change throughout the seasons. Stayed pretty consistent.
I mean, but that's what's wild is like, you've got shows like The Office that, the lexicon has endured, and there's still to this day, people will just be sitting around and someone will be like, oh, how much does that cost? They're like, oh, it's free. And then under their breath, someone will be like, it's free real estate. Like there's just floats that pop up from that show everywhere.
Yeah. Yes. For sure.
It's rad. Well, I've kept you a little over, so I'll let you go. But I'd love to have you back on whenever, because I know we could probably chat forever. Or I guess you're in LA, so we could probably.
I am in LA. We can go get a coffee or something.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah, but this was so much fun. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you watching the show.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can go to frameandrefpod.com and follow the link to buy me a coffee. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.